Now let's have a look at farming. Now we will cover this in the food section. And now as we're looking at innovations and invention, well, farming, they certainly had a genius for it in the Western Hemisphere. And this is all up and down, South America, Mesoamerica, and North America. Many, many contributions. Terracing is a good example. Now in the mountains, it's very difficult to plant for a number of reasons. They're challenged with moisture, they're challenged with soil, they're challenged with temperature. Many, many foods were developed up in the mountains in the Andes over thousands of years and hundreds of years and over generations. They contributed terracing to the world. Now terracing is making a stair-step type of arrangement out of a mountain. So this did many things. It gave you lots of land and made it easier for the plants to grow, because instead of a very hilly territory then, they could grow on a flat area. They could also then design irrigation methodologies, which they had many ingenious ones, of having the water run down to the terraces that were in a lower part of the mountain. So many food plants developed, as I say, over thousands of years, not growing out in the wild by any means, but developed on Indian farms. And the food plants of the Western Hemisphere show a greater difference from their wild sister plants than the food plants of Asia or Europe or Africa or any of the other continents. Now Europeans, when they came over, they were amazed at the yields, the amount of food that they could get out of an acre of corn, for example, barley, wheat, and oats. The yields were not that good, and they're very difficult to grow. As is rice, is the same situation with rice. It's difficult to grow, the yields are okay. But they were amazed because corn does produce a lot of food. Now you can hear, and it wasn't too long ago you could read, that the Europeans came over here and taught the Indians agriculture. And you can still read that in some places, which would be so comical if it wasn't tragic to hear something like that. It's a real truth about the history of agriculture. Many of the places in South America, in particular in the Andes, where they contributed a lot to the world, it's considered that a lot of these facilities that we see and go and visit are agricultural research stations, such as Machu Picchu, which many of you might have been to. That's considered to be what some of these places were, because it was a spiritual adulation thing for them, as well as something practical, that it took generations and generations and generations to breed some of these food plants. And you had to have all the different soil samples, the elevation samples, the moisture samples, all different ways of growing them to slowly breed some of these foods. Pepper being a good example. Pepper and tomato in the nightshade family, which grew over in Europe and around the world, but no one else turned that into a beautiful food that you can eat. It was a poison, a deadly poison, the nightshade family. The Spanish cut off the hands of the indigenous when they tried to feed them tomatoes at first. But that's a very good example right there. That doesn't just happen overnight. Anyway, that's a little bit about farming, and we'll see you next time.